distance from which this shooter was operating prevented any counter sniping by the police officers with their handguns. So the only way you could have stopped this in the middle of the engagement was to have what they call an overwatch, someone with a sniper weapon that the Secret Service uses to be able to pinpoint where it's coming and then be able to interdict. But what you point out in terms of what happens in a crowd like this, when you have this scenario where someone is randomly spraying a crowd from that kind of distance, he's right, you have no idea where it's coming from. It's dark, there's music, there's lights. You, first of all, can't identify the sounds, but once it's identified, it is sheer panic because it's so impossible to have real-time directions as to go to this place, go to this exit. A lot of times the strategies that are used to protect venues is that they will use obfuscation. In other words, they'll put up large, even cloth-like fabrics to try to shield the crowd. But nobody thinks about that at these public venues and public events, which thousands of them happen across the country every summer, if not throughout the year. And so how do you now take almost a Secret Service protective 360-degree awareness and apply it to these types of events? It's nearly impossible.
No, I mean, it really sounds like you can't. You know, I think like so many Americans lately, you know, as we travel around, whether you're at a concert, you're on a train, you're waiting at a bus stop, I mean, there are so many different places where you find yourself surrounded by a large crowd, which seems to be one of the things driving the attraction to crazed sadistic killers. There's no way to protect large crowds all over the place, is there?
No. I mean, you know, the question becomes, is this the threshold event? The largest massacre in the United States, certainly as it relates to Las Vegas, but, you know, in almost any place in the country. Is this a threshold event that now says we're going to change the way we live our lives? We're going to change the way we go to public events. And when we're going to do a hard check on everybody, we're going to do lines of sight analysis as to who could fire into a crowd. You know, these are the types of decisions that are made, again, from a Secret Service protective standpoint. The FBI has a tremendous capability to do this, but do you do this with every possible public event?
You couldn't, right? I mean, there isn't the manpower in the entire country to do something like that.
You're absolutely right. You know, the resources that we would have to apply, which is, by the way, a part of the general thought process of our opponents, the guys who want to do damage to the United States. And we don't know what this individual's motivations are. There's reports that ISIS is claiming responsibility for this, but that's been unsubstantiated.
We have no idea, right? That's not confirmed.
We have no idea whether that's true. And so whatever his motivation was, the question is there a way to spot these individuals beforehand? Because it's about preventing, not responding so much. And that's really the challenge in any of these types of situations.
When you talk about, is this the threshold event that changes the way that we do things, I know that we have thought about this in the context of all the way back to the marathon, Boston Marathon bomber. You know, you say the largest event, we said the same thing about the Pulse nightclub.
Right.
I mean, these events continue happening, and in the aftermath, you hear people say, we are Americans, we won't have our freedom taken away, we're going to continue to go places. But at some point, as an American, when so many have piled up, do you say, do we take a break from going to big crowds for a while? Do we not go to places like Times Square? I mean, what is the tipping point?
Yeah, well, the country was shocked way back when in 1966 when Charles Whitman climbed to the top of that tower building in the University of Austin and shot 15 and killed many others. You know, this is very similar from that perspective. That didn't change our behavior. And we have school shootings. That doesn't change the behavior. But what is the right response?
Yeah.
How do we live in a free society and take the measures that we need to make ourselves safe and apply the necessary resources? Obviously, 9/11 was that threshold event that changed the way we thought about our safety from a societal perspective. But this now becomes very much a domestic, in your backyard type of scenario.
Yeah.
You know, and it raises all sorts of issues that obviously would be the subject of the debate in Congress, whether it's mental health, whether it's gun control,
Michael,
all sorts of issues.
Let me ask you really quickly before we run out of time. I mean, you were the director of Homeland Security in New York. What are you telling your family right now?
Yeah.
I mean, are you telling your family to stay out of public places? And what would you tell people you care about?
So it's so random. What I tell people is you cannot live your life that way. that unfortunately life is full of risks, and the only ways that you can mitigate them is to be aware of where you are. So oftentimes, I've said this before, this is a society we are always connected to that phone and to the stream of information and talking to friends, and that's wonderful. It's the way we live our lives. But it always matters to know where you are, who you're talking to, what events are going on around you. But even in that situation, even with that awareness, this type of situation that would not have necessarily helped you, because it's impossible to spot where the threat was coming and how to get out of that scene immediately. But overall, you can't live your life fearful. You must live your life aware of what's going on in your surroundings.
Yeah. It's kind of like when you go to see a doctor and they give you that could be this, could be that, and I always say, what would you do if it was your kid? You really wouldn't tell people in your family to stay away from concerts for a little while.